Kia ora and welcome back to another episode of Both Sides Now. We break down politics with the aim to break down political polarisation and get you interested in the issues that matter. I'm Eve McCallum and this is Alex Martin. Welcome back to another episode. We're going to today be talking about Stuart Nash, which I'm sure we probably heard a lot about in the news this week, the changes to consent laws, and everyone's favourite topic of inflation. But before we get on to that, Alex, how have you been?
I'm well. It's very much midwinter vibes. I've been feeling a little bit, just want to go home, just want to stay in bed and stuff. But you know what? We truck on through. We're nearly in August, which is crazy, but here we are. How are you?
I'm well. I will also personally apologise for anyone who listened to our episode last weekend because I did do a poor job of editing the first
So
part.
funny.
It was definitely a bit, quite hungover from a accidentally really large night that was had on Saturday night. So apologies to anyone who heard that.
That was just so funny because we were like, we're going to go and have cocktails. We're so excited with the friends. And then we ended up in town and then I had a podcast put out the next day.
Yeah. All of a sudden it was 3:30 when I was getting into bed and I was like, oh dear, this is going to make editing a podcast fun. But never mind, we are here. But aside from that, I'm well. It's like you, definitely midwinter. Today's a particularly grim day in Auckland.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking forward to, I guess, we're nearly into the last month of winter, which is good. But before we get into all of this political news this week, another bit of news that affects, young people is R&V is leaving Gisborne.
Damn, end of an era.
End of a huge era. I've only actually ever been once, and the weather was appalling. We were in gumboots pretty much the whole time. But it was such an awesome experience, and I also think, why else would I ever go to Gisborne? It's so out of the way. It was a 7-hour drive from Auckland. It was miles away. It feels quite sad and like an end of an era.
I struggle to sort of get into this sort of news because I've never been to R&B or RNA, the South Island equivalent. Just not really my thing. I personally, I love camping and I love going on tramps and things like that, but mixed with alcohol and loud music, and I don't mind a little bit of D&B. I am a Otago alumni, for goodness sakes, but I don't know, not quite my thing. But I do still empathise with the thousands of people that go every single year, and it's become such a big thing, I know, to sit on the hill and watch the countdown and stuff. So yeah, it'd be pretty devastating, I think, for Gisborne as well.
Yeah, definitely. But it feels like R&B is a bit of a victim of funflation, which is a new term I've learned recently, basically, it's like inflation, but funflation means that it feels like everything that's fun or entertainment is costing more. And I think that probably you'd put R&B squarely into that category, that it's just got so expensive and it's a long way to get to Gisborne. And it's just getting harder and harder to put these big events on.
Yeah, well, you see a lot of really big festivals being no longer able to keep running in New Zealand, which is funny because then you also see Electric Avenue down in Christchurch, which is the biggest festival, I think, in the Southern Hemisphere or something. It's ginormous. So they do really well, but then other festivals, the smaller ones, which I wouldn't put R&B into a smaller one category, but yeah, they're really struggling.
Yeah, I think Electric Ave's lucky being at Hagley Park. It's got the ability to size up. Whereas I think Gisborne, where R&B is just sort of hit max capacity and there's sort of no more room to grow. So yeah, very sad. I heard a rumour it's moving to Hamilton. I'm not sure it's going to have quite the same effect. I'm not sure you're going to convince me to go to Hamilton for New Year's Eve, but we'll see.
Hey, well, it's closer.
Yeah, true, a little bit less of a hike.
Yeah.
But turning now to, slightly more serious matters, Stuart Nash.
Oh my God. Get out of town. I can't stand this man, and I hope this week has been an example as to why you should not stand this man either. I think Stuart Nash absolutely reeks of desperation, and this whole saga of him texting Chris Finlayson, former National MP, and spreading what is very clearly a sexist comment, whether or not Stuart Nash thinks he meant it in a sexist way or as an attack on Katie Nimmin, the MP for Napier, having a go at her and for taking maternity leave. It doesn't matter. What was said in this sort of direct message, sort of where he feels comfortable kind of having that kind of guys chat, Stuart Nash sort of said that he never intended this message to go out, make public. It was a personal message between two old mates and stuff, and it's well, this is exactly why that sort of locker room kind of chat, it's just totally unacceptable, and I think it's just really pulled the veil off where we are in society today and how people, men especially, think about women.
I also think as well, because he, and on Saturday morning, he put out a response in the Herald, a Red Rider reply, and that's where he sort of said, you expect it to go public. So not only has he shown that he's sexist, but he's also shown that he's incredibly naive, because anything that gets written in a text message or an email, you can potentially expect for that to go public. So I'm not sure why you would be so like, oh, I never thought we'd go anywhere. I have no idea what the relationship between him and Chris Finlayson is. I would note that Chris Finlayson, though, does make lots of comments about how much he dislikes New Zealand First.
This is the conclusion that I came to as well. Like, Stuart Nash's logic of texting Chris Finlayson is absolutely beyond me. Because if you've had the pleasure of listening to Chris and Phil on cross-party lines, you will know that if New Zealand First has no haters, Chris Finlayson is dead. Like, it's like Chris Finlayson has been so open about how much he dislikes New Zealand First and their policies and the sorts of candidates they are bringing in. It's like you've got to have reasonably expected that would have found its way out into the public or just, again, yeah, I don't know.
And also, in his response, he also said, like, oh, I was getting lots of feedback that she was an invisible MP for the last 2.5 years. That's literally not what his text was about. His text was about the fact that she'd taken, 9 months off. And then, she'd come back for a week and then take another month off. So if his text wasn't about the fact that she's been invisible, doesn't think she's achieved anything for Napier, which, that's a criticism you can give an MP. I don't know if that's fair criticism or not of Katie. I'm not close enough to know.
No.
But you can give that criticism of someone. But criticising her for taking time off, knowing that she's had a child, that's just sexist.
I'm feeling really, really ramped up about this because this shit pisses me off. So we've talked a lot about it. Should we just read out what the text said? Okay. Says, comments like yours motivate and drive me harder. Katie took 9 months off on full pay, went back for a week, then took another month off. Laziest MP I have ever come across. Nice woman, but ill-suited to the rigours of being an electorate MP. Fuck off.
It's so tasteless.
So tasteless. And it's just like...
It's also a really good lesson, though. Like, don't put things in a text or in written format if you don't want them to get repeated.
And, like, I feel like that is a sort of idea that is really instilled in a lot of us. Like, I think us growing up in a real digital age, we know that what is put into writing and put onto the internet or in a text message or whatever, that's out there forever.
Absolutely.
So I just really, really big failure from Stuart Nash to think about the potential consequences of his actions there.
And I also think, I watched Katie, she came out and she said, no, actually, I took 6 months away from Parliament, but only 10 weeks full-time off work, and then she was back in her electorate. So she was working back far earlier than, a lot of, mums do go back. And I think there's no judgment at all. You can go back whenever you want. Everybody is different. And I thought what was interesting as well is that Katie Nimmin did an interview with Heather Duplessis-Allen on News Talk ZB on Friday night. I think it was Friday. And Heather was basically questioning her, saying, should you have gone back earlier? How is it fair on Napier that, they didn't have an MP representing them? And this was a fascinating line of questions. I'm not sure if you listened to the interview or not.
I did listen.
It was a fascinating line of questions. I think Heather could probably only ask those questions because she's had 2 children. I think she took less than 6 months off for each of them. But I was like, I don't think you can personally judge how long someone takes off with a child. I mean, maybe it is different for a politician. I don't know. I haven't had children. I'm not a politician. But I did think it was a really interesting, and I'm not sure how I felt about the line of questioning.
No,
Heather.
Me neither. It's funny because my mum, when she had my youngest brother, there's about a 9-year age gap, so I remember this very vividly. He was premature and she ended up having Jack, my brother, and then going back to work a week later. I know. Icon.
Would he have still
My
been-
mum's amazing.
Would he have still been in hospital?
He was in NICU. Yeah. And but this is the thing. Like for my mum, it was like, she wasn't her first rodeo. She had me. She'd had my brother before my youngest brother, and that's my brother with a lot of disability needs and stuff. So she was just like, I'm so fully equipped to deal with this. And she definitely did feel a lot of judgment for going back to work so quickly as well. A lot of people thought she was crazy. But like, shit, like, I don't know, that's what she wanted to do. And I just think it's that right to choose, to do what you want to do.
Because conversely, my mum was a stay-at-home mum, and that's amazing. I think she's equally as amazing, and
100%.
I just think it's everyone's own choices. And I mean, I personally, at this stage, couldn't see myself being a stay-at-home mum. I did tell my boyfriend if we have children, he's going to raise them. I don't want to be a stay-at-home parent.
It's funny. My parents my boyfriend's like, look, if you just, I'm just waiting for you to make it big, so I can just be the stay-at-home dad. And I'm like, yeah, that's my man.
But isn't it nice that we do live in a time now where it's becoming more normalised for the man to be the one who takes the time off and looks after the baby if the woman wants to go back to work? But also, it's just no judgment. Like, it shouldn't matter when you want to go back to work.
And because in your employment agreement, whether it's an employment agreement as a parliamentarian or in a private business or whatever, you have those avenues to make those decisions between your employer and as the employee to decide how your work is going to be redistributed and going to be allocated, who's going to address it, blah, 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 blah. It's just that's, I think, between employer and employee to work out those sorts of things. Obviously, in these sorts of circumstances, you've got an electorate that relies on you as representative. But it sounds like, as was sort of uncovered in that interview with Katie Nim and Heather Duplessis-Allen, it was they had worked it out amongst their neighbouring sort of electorates to support Katie Niman while she took that leave. Awesome. Woman supporting woman. Love to see it.
And I remember one time, I think Amy Adams said to my dad, when they were discussing, how she handled questions about, that she was mum and she had children and was going to be a politician. And she said, well, we need more mums in Parliament.
Yes.
And of course we do.
Well, you're not going to see the change if you don't, have people in there needing that change, I think.
And I think we've recently been able to see Nicola Grigg, who's the MP for Selwyn, who's had a baby, and then obviously, of course, Jacinda Ardern. I think Jacinda only took 6 weeks off.
Yeah.
Which I get a little bit different. She is Prime Minister. But, again, every situation is different, and I think you just kind of have to roll with whatever's best for the mother and whatever's best for the child.
Absolutely. I think it does speak to a wider conversation that does need to be had about gender roles in society and how we see that sort of intersection with work and taking that sort of time off, how we balance that. Flexible work has become such a bigger thing since COVID and stuff, and I think it has really sort of shown that we are able to be a little bit more flexible than making it so that you have to be in the office 9 to 5 or whatever, 40 hours a week and some. I just think so many of our workforce are parents or have responsibilities as caregivers or whatever. I just think that we need to, I don't have a solution, but I think we need to have a look and have more women in positions of power or as leaders so that their voices are heard and that good changes can be made.
Yeah, and it's cool. There are lots of mums that are already in Parliament. So Finance Minister Nicola Willis, Erica Stamford's got children, Catherine Wynne, who's another MP, she's got 4 children, Irina Williams got 4, Barb Edmonds got 8. There are heaps of mums in Parliament, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, it is. Not to sort of kind of be a downer and bring it back to Stuart Nash, because I don't feel like he should be the intense focus of, it is an example, right? But I just wanted to sort of speak to when he said, I think in that sort of his response to this whole saga, he said, I'm happy to be judged on my own track record achievements and work ethic. That's the contest I want. Okay, let's have a look at your track record then, Stuart Nash. So in 2011, Nash contested the Napier electorate, but he didn't get it, nor was he ranked high enough to appear on the Labour Party list. So he ended up signing on to be the Chief of Staff for the newly appointed Labour leader, David Shearer. However, Nash resigned after just 4 months onto the job and returned to his hometown of Napier, get this, citing the birth of his new child and focusing on winning back the electorate there. So he recognised then that having a child is a huge commitment, and I feel like that's common knowledge, right? But he stepped back and from that position to be, I guess, a parent. And so I just don't know how that fits in.
Curious.
Moving forward, in 2021, he admitted to phoning the police commissioner, then Police Commissioner Andrew Coster, suggesting that a decision should be appealed. The police should appeal a court decision, which is a real serious breach, I think, of comity which is essentially the sort of theory or what would you call it?
Constitutional convention?
Constitutional convention, shall we go with, that the three branches of government, so the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, don't meddle in each other's business, particularly, I think, the executive and the judiciary. They stay clear of it. They're like, okay, mutual understanding, mutual respect. We're not going to tell you what to do, right? So that's a bad call. Then, 2 weeks later, Chris Hipkins sacked Stuart Nash from his ministerial portfolios after he breached the cabinet manual. Following his career in Parliament, Nash's now former employer, Robert Walters, launched a formal review regarding comments that he made in a personal capacity. Moving forward again, then we've got his appearance on the platform where he was asked, how do you define a woman? And he said a woman is somebody with a pussy and a pair of tits. Yeah, just sit with that for a minute. Because not true and so fucking rude. And then obviously finally we've got the sort of comments from recently this week as well.
Yeah, I think Stuart Nash's reply, the article that he put out, goes into the category of you're in a hole, stop digging. And I think it probably would have been best for him just to stop and not respond.
Which, it's also funny because in that article he does make a response. It notes that his wife is a public relations person. It's like, you've got some skills there. You should use it and make him shut up.
I also think as well he says in the article he's got 2 daughters and he's got a wife, therefore he's not sexist. I don't think that prevents you from being sexist. There are plenty of men who've got, a wife and kids and daughters and they are sexist. I don't think that automatically means that you're not.
No, not at all. It's like being like, I'm not racist. I have a black friend. It's just that sort of logic does not work in 2026. And it hasn't for a while, I don't think.
Agree.
Yeah, so grim. So I will give a little bit of credit where credit is due to the national MPs who called out Stuart Nash on this. I thought Stuff News, whatever it is now, their coverage of it with Gina Lynch was hilarious. Gina Lynch, I thought, was absolutely fighting back, laughing, because this whole situation is you just see how ludicrous it is and just ridiculous. And I thought that people like Chris Bishop, Nicola Willis and Christopher Luxon's responses were really good. I think Stuart Nash has really handed the National Party a little bit of a, here you go, here's one, you can show some leadership now.
100%. It's been a great week for the National Party strategy team.
And I also think a little bit of credit as well, swallows vomit, to Christopher Luxon for calling out the manosphere as well, and how that these sorts of comments really do link into that pathway down the manosphere as well. Have you seen Louis Theroux's Manosphere documentary?
Very little bits of it. I've not watched it properly. I've heard it's quite grim.
It is a bit grim. I think for me, it didn't tell me anything I didn't already know.
Yeah.
Because I'm a bit chronically online, but also really, really important conversation. Or adolescence as well. Did you watch Adolescence?
Adolescence is fantastic.
Yeah, it's just stuff like that, we're seeing a lot in these representations in the media. It is nice to see a Prime Minister speak about it too, because I think that manosphere sort of stuff and this sort of new age of misogyny, it sort of feels is really concerning.
And I think we're starting to see that as creeping into New Zealand First a little bit as well. So I think credit to the Prime Minister for calling that out. And also for saying that Stuart Nash would not be a part of any cabinet that they put together of New Zealand First if they win the next election. So that was really, really good leadership.
Yeah. Pivoting now to what I think is really bad leadership from the National Party. I'm so sorry, Eve. You might not be happy with me on this one, but let's talk now about consent laws, because that's also been in the news, right? I think that this should be a real opportunity for celebrating, recognising that we've got a gap in our laws, that our laws are outdated, and we need to change our laws about what consent means, or rather than what it doesn't mean. But I'm really disappointed. I think that this would have been an opportunity for some real awesome cross-party support that was already there and in the works. Instead, National has announced that it will be campaigning on changing the consent laws. Can I open us up with some statistics, Eve?
Yep, well, I don't know if we really want to hear them, but we'll hear them.
No, I don't think anybody wants to hear them, but we can't ignore them. So we know that 1 in 3 women have experienced one or more incidents of sexual assault in their lifetime. And we also know that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 18 men have experienced forced intercourse or attempts in their lifetime. That's according to a Ministry of Justice 2022 survey.
It's pretty dark.
It is pretty dark. So I think the consent laws, changing how we define consent in legislation, and therefore meaning, what is a crime and how do our judicial officers sort of interpret the issues before them in terms of the legislation they can apply, it needs an upgrade, right? At the moment, our consent laws define what isn't consent. So, for example, a person does not consent to sexual activity just because they do not protest or offer physical resistance to the activity. A person does not consent to sexual activity if the activity occurs while they are asleep or unconscious. A person doesn't consent to an act of sexual activity if they allow the act because they are mistaken about its nature, equality, etc., etc. The Crimes Act, I think it's section 128A, defines what consent isn't. And I think we are in desperate need, well overdue need, of legislation that's in the affirmative, that positively describes what consent is. What are your thoughts on this one, Ed?
Absolutely agree. I actually, when the changes came out, I hadn't really realised that we didn't clearly define what it is.
Me neither.
In my mind, it sort of mistakenly assumed that it was something that we had already well enshrined in law because, as you can see from those statistics, sexual assault is such a massive problem in New Zealand. But yeah, I hadn't realised we had to define it, so I think it's fantastic that we're going to define it because, there are a lot of women who suffer harm. I'm sure we both probably knew of people at university who were sexually assaulted, and I think that it's a well overdue conversation to be had. But obviously, one of the criticisms that Alex is going to, I think, speak to is the fact that Labor are already potentially working on and Bill in this space and have been allegedly working with National and the Greens to try and get some consensus on this. So yeah. I guess I'm interested to think your criticism lies with it.
Yeah, I guess I just sort of, I take a real issue with them saying that this is going to become an election issue because I just don't think it needs to be. And I guess I sort of juxtapose it with, say, like the solar power policies, right? Where you've got different parties coming out with different ideas of how they want to get solar into our houses and electrify the nation and stuff. I think there's an array of different ideas, there are different approaches to this issue. And while I do, as I think I've said, agree with, say, the Green Party saying, let's just get on with it, let's go. Equally, I do also think that being able to debate these ideas over the next few months is really constructive so we can get a much more sort of balanced approach as to how we tackle that issue. And I find a real difference with when it comes to the consent laws because there's agreement on it that it needs to change. And in fact, work has been done across the parties, across the House to address this issue. And then National have walked out on those negotiations and those sort of policy workshops and things to say, oh, actually, we're not going to go in that direction. We're going to campaign on it instead. And I just don't think something as serious as this, like consent laws that clearly have really direct links to sexual violence, sexual harm in our society, is something that needs a debate when it's so obviously clear. I think I really struggle a lot with Christopher Luxon's response saying it's a traffic management issue. Like, get wrecked. Like, I don't know. I think I can appreciate that what is real, like, there are a lot of laws that need to go before the House that need to be debated and really well thought out. And there often isn't a lot of time to be able to do that. I think that's fair. But I think when you look at the other things that have been progressed through the House, say, for example, the definitions bill, when that's going to make fuck all difference in actually addressing, sex and gender related crime, or, putting attention to making English an official language in New Zealand. It's like, sorry, didn't know that English language was more at risk of, due to a lack of legislative definition than consent was. Like, it just doesn't feel like their priorities are in line,
Yeah, I think I guess I have a couple of thoughts on this. I think it's completely justified that they can say, look, we're at a stage in the cycle where we don't have time to do it. I guess I would put aside one issue because I guess, if government have different priorities, there are different reasons why they put forward different bills. And yeah, I think that the fact that this one isn't, they ran out of time to do it, I think is fair enough. I've been interested to see how much they do actually end up campaigning on it, because it's not something that I think, it's not a particularly, excuse the pun, but sexy thing to campaign on. Like, it's quite serious, and I think that there's probably general agreement on what needs to change. But I also think as well, it's good not to rush it, because it's the sort of thing I think you need to make sure it's very thorough and robust, because I guess the consequences, I guess, on both ends are quite massive if they get it wrong, and yeah, so I think I don't have a problem with them taking time to do it. Look, I'm not across, don't know behind the scenes, potentially maybe it was getting too hard to try and agree it with Labour. I don't know where those conversations go to. I guess we don't know. I probably could have chosen a better word than saying traffic management issues, particularly because it's such a serious topic.
Yeah.
I guess those are my thoughts on it.
No, I think they're fair thoughts. I feel like this should be a real opportunity to celebrate recognition of this gap in our law and needing to address it. But I'm just disappointed with how National's gone about it, which is a shame because, as I say, like, I think it should be something to celebrate that we address this. Because, like, our Crimes Act, for example, at least this part, hasn't been touched in like 40 years. And we've seen other countries like, and like-minded countries with Westminster systems, so Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, all come up to speed with defining what consent is in their legislation. They're leagues ahead of us, and it's just a shame that something that is so overdue becomes so political.
I guess though, Labour and the Greens were in power for 6 years, they could have changed it.
And that's another fair criticism. But it's also like kind of funny because I saw like Christopher Luxon posted on Facebook this week being like, stalking under Labour legal, stalking under National a crime. And it's those sorts of behaviours that really frustrate me, because I absolutely agree that it's the fault of successive governments, all of the governments before this one, that issues specifically related to women have not been addressed. And shame on all of those governments, to be fair to them. But I think, and I know consent is different from stalking, but as an example, like, I found that post from Christopher Luxon really kind of missed the point, especially when there had been so much cross-party work done on those stalking laws to come to fruition. So I think absolutely fair to be critical of this government and previous governments for not getting this stuff sorted. I just don't want to see it so politicised when it should be, a time that we are welcoming these sorts of positive changes in our law.
Because essentially it is, right, it's a change to women's rights. It's improving women's rights and women's safety in New Zealand.
Yeah, and that is not to say that men, won't be affected by these changes too. Like, as we opened up, 1 in 18 men are in those statistics as well of experiencing forced intercourse or attempts. So it does affect men too, but we know that it affects women disproportionately, and because, like, patriarchy. So another thing that has obviously been quite a big sort of campaigning thing in elections past is, I guess, tying back to what you opened with, funflation.
Funflation, except we're going to talk to kind of the original term of it, which is inflation.
Boo.
Please bear with me. I know that inflation is not a particularly sexy word or a particularly sexy topic, but I do think it's important to sort of understand and appreciate, because it actually affects every area of our lives, on a daily basis, whenever you leave the house. So for those of you who don't know, inflation is a term used to sort of talk about when prices move up and down. It is commonly measured by what's called the Consumer Price Index. So the Consumer Price Index tracks the price of essentially a huge basket of goods and services that are chosen, and they're weighted every 3 years to be reflective of what people are spending their money on. Statistics New Zealand makes about 100,000 price checks every 3 months to compile its quarterly Consumer Price Index. They kind of visit shops, websites, observes how prices are changing, and survey businesses on their prices. So inflation relates to supply and demand, so prices will rise if there is more money chasing fewer goods and services. High inflation is a problem, essentially because it means that the purchasing power of your money decreases. So what you can spend $5 on today, if you've got high inflation, you'll essentially get less bang for your buck tomorrow. Deflation is also an issue because it means that prices are essentially going backwards, and what happens is people end up sort of saying, oh, I'm not going to buy anything now, I'm going to wait for the price to go down, and the values of goods and services that people have go backwards. So kind of the government likes to keep inflation between 1% and 3%. It's sort of this target number they do it.
Goldilocks zone.
Yeah, and essentially it's seen as an appropriate target for price stability over a medium term, partly because the measurement, because it sort of shows price stability, but still a little bit of wiggle room for things to keep growing. Kind of don't want sort of things to stay the same forever.
Well, it's like stagflation is a thing.
So stagflation is, I think, my understanding is when it doesn't really move.
Yeah.
So the New Zealand inflation results came out this week, and as I said, they're released every quarter. And New Zealand inflation was at 4.1%. So this is slightly above that 1 to 3 sort of percentage where we try to keep inflation. But interestingly enough, a big reason for this is petrol. So it's no secret there's a war going on in Iran, and every time you fill up your car, it's the price at the pump are getting worse. They got better for a while, and they're getting worse again. I filled my car up this morning; it was pretty grim. Without petrol, inflation would only have been 2.9%. So that's a massive change from the 4.1%. So price of petrol in the last quarter was up 27.5%. Diesel was also up 71%. Now, households use petrol way more than they use diesel, which is why we haven't seen as big of a jump. But I think it is interesting to note that we would be within that range had it not been for essentially the war in Iran that's been going on. The other contributor as well, I think that we're probably all feeling a little bit, electricity is up 12%. That my power bills are, as we've talked about before, are quite large. Then there's also sort of rates and payments. They were up 8.8%. But it was really encouraging, though, to see that rents are only up 0.5%, and food inflation was only up at 2.8%. Comparing to 3 years ago, this was 12.3%.
Woof.
So a lot of the sort of daily goods that we do encounter with are coming back, but I just think that we're still seeing petrol, I guess the reliability on fossil fuels, and it's sort of signaling more strongly that New Zealand needs to sort of have a plan for how we're going to kind of be more self-sufficient in the energy area.
Snap. That's what I was going to talk about. I think 2 points from this, right? Definitely, we obviously understand that this spike in inflation is largely because of the war in Iran and the fuel crisis that we are feeling here. And it's just another example of why we need to stop relying on foreign countries' fossil fuels, start becoming a much more self-resilient, and actually address what is a climate issue, what is this reliance on fuel and energy. Like, I really want to see some really positive action in shifting our mentality, Kiwis' mentality, about relying on petrol and diesel or gas, and moving on to more electric sources, renewable sources as well. The other thing I wanted to speak to is how interesting and how different this approach to this inflation rise is to when Labour was in government nearly 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. Because I think Labour got a hard time for seeing inflation rise to about 7.1%, I think it was, after COVID, during COVID. And you can see a similarity of this being an outside caused shock that has impacted our economy here. And this national government has been very quick to be like, oh yeah, but without the petrol and the war in Iran and stuff, it'd be all good. We'd actually be in that Goldilocks zone again. Whereas I didn't see any of that back a few years ago when people were slamming Labour. And I think criticism is due for how inflation was under Labour, but you didn't see that, but if COVID wasn't a thing, inflation would actually be here. I did just find a real difference in that sort of conversation we have around it.
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of comments on that. I think one, probably that is the nature of the fact that the right sort of more trusted when it comes to the economy, I think. Also, two, Labour was in quite a different sphere, right? Like spending was a lot more And maybe they needed to spend some of the money they did need to spend. I think everyone would agree that when they put out the wage subsidy, for example, in 2020, to help people that, weren't able to work when lockdown, that was completely fair enough. But I think there has been reports that have come out around the fact that the spending was really high. They probably didn't need to spend as much as they did. So I think there will have been some contribution to that. But yeah, you can't deny that COVID, which is an external factor, will have contributed more strongly to that. Yeah, I wonder if those stats were coming out at the time we just weren't picking up about what it would have been, or if it was just far too entangled. I think petrol's a bit easier because you can kind of take that one good out of the basket of goods when they calculate this, when they calculate the CPI.
Yeah.
So I wonder if COVID was just affected every area of our lives.
100%.
It's so much harder to calculate.
Absolutely. And it's also funny because I feel like you're right in how we look at statistics that come out. I think one statistic that may have been ignored by a lot of people was the fact that, pointing to this easy criticism of the 7.7% inflation figure that Labor got to following or during the COVID ordeal, global pandemic, once in 100-year sort of lifetime thing. You compare it to the rest of the world, we did really well. Not only did we save lives, I think, from our approach and how we dealt with COVID, but I think the average of the OECD was around 10%. They were suffering with inflation. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of a bit weary about pointing to this truly like once in a lifetime situation, and then being like, see, look how bad it is, and then this government being like, hey, we're so much better. Like, it doesn't really seem like a fair comparison to me.
Yeah, I guess though, at the end of the day, when people vote, right, they're voting on how they feel economically, and people will, on the whole, I think, feel better economically than they would. Like, prices were 3 years ago. Things just kept going up and up and up, But the fact that we can see, for example, like, rents aren't really increasing, food inflation's down quite a lot, that will help. But yeah, the petrol stuff, I think the more interesting point of this conversation is how do we pivot so we have more control and we're not so like, I guess, subject to what goes on internationally around when it comes to petrol prices, because we're so petrol and diesel, like particularly diesel for the business side of the economy, we're so reliant on it, and there are areas that you wouldn't even know diesel wasn't used, that was where it's needed.
Well, I have never ever filled up anything at a petrol station using diesel. I genuinely, that's just so out of my line of sight, so I really do not see how it affects other people, I guess, as well. Yeah, I don't know. I think we have a huge reliance on petrol and diesel and gas. Does make you think, like the LNG terminal as well. You're like, oh, not the call. We can't be putting more money, putting billions into putting an LNG terminal in, when clearly this is not something that's going to keep us moving into the future.
I do think that's why it's really good, though, we've spoken about before on this podcast, the solar panel policies, right?
Yes.
That's definitely a step in the right direction. Petrol's quite a hard one, though, in terms of like filling up your car, because we're still, at least, might be naive, but I still think we're way off electric cars being a viable alternative. And I think that New Zealand trying to drill for our own oil and gas, firstly, it was a ban, but secondly as well, they haven't actually found any oil and gas for a while in New Zealand anyway, when they've done the deep sea offshore oil drilling, which I understand, which this government has allowed them to do, but yeah, nothing's been found for a while. So the ability for us to kind of like, what next? I don't actually know what the solution is, but I think it's quite a complex conversation. Is there a world where the government potentially subsidises electric cars? This government has consented a whole lot more new renewable energy projects, which means we're potentially going to have more renewable energy, so we've got the capacity to charge more electric cars. So is subsidising electric cars the issue? I don't know. Are electric cars actually even good enough yet? Like, you've got to charge them up, but it takes ages to charge them up, and some of them don't have a particularly good range. Particularly we'll be looking to trucks, like, and they need diesel. Like, where is the alternative?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we did have the electric car subsidy, and I think that would have done a lot to open up the markets for, I think one of the big criticisms was that it just went to rich people and
and that's exactly where it was going.
But the thing is that, like, how many people buy their car, like, outright? Obviously, there is going to get to a point where you are buying a second-hand car, and that second-hand car might be an electric vehicle. So it does get down, trickle down, but it does get down to people who may not be able to afford a brand new car eventually.
I guess though, what is the question is what's a policy we can help, like, because there's people that sit squeeze middle, like low to middle income New Zealand, because I think that the higher incomes will can deal with shocks more easily, because you've just got that bandwidth to deal with it. But I think, like, how do we do that? Is there a policy, where we potentially rather than sort of have a general clean car discount, do we target it? Do we say we want these particular areas we recognize that you might struggle with it? We're going to, give you, whether it's a subsidy or whether we give them interest-free loans. I wonder if there's some discussion around what we can do for lower to middle income New Zealand.
Some trade agreements with, countries that provide and build electric vehicles and stuff. We're going to have to talk to Mike Casey from Wiring Aotearoa. I'm sure he's got all of the answers for us. Okie dokie. Social media moment of the week. What does enrolling to vote, having hot friends, and Tanya Waikato have in common? Well, social media, apparently. Tanya Waikato, she is a Green MP. No, she's not. Tanya Waikato, she is a candidate for the Green Party in the Waiariki electorate. And this week, she has been using her social media for, I think, an excellent purpose to get people enrolled to vote. How? A slightly unconventional approach, perhaps, but one that I think is hugely iconic. Waikato says that she was thinking, how can we get people's attention in the never-ending slop of the algorithm without billionaire backers who pay to saturate your feeds with right-wing AI slop? Period, Queen. I agree with you on that one. The answer, she says, use what the good Lord gave you. And decades of training. She is definitely Fitzbo. So Tanya Waikato had been making these posts on Instagram mainly with her and some of her friends making thirst trap bikini photos with the graphics over top being like, here's how many days are left to switch or enroll onto the Māori roll, and here's how many days there are to enroll to vote for the election. And I think this is so iconic. You've got women in their bikinis on social media. I think this is hugely empowering. That I think it's informative and with the countdowns when to enrol on the Māori roll and the general roll. And the Māori roll, I will add, will no longer be taking new enrolments or changes after midnight on August the 6th. So if you're Māori and you want to enrol on the Māori roll, you've got a very limited time to do so. I suggest you get on it. It is hugely important for Māori to make the decision on which roll they're on. Your roll choice does affect which candidates you get to choose for, and it does also affect how many Māori seats there are in Parliament too. The more Māori enrolled in the Māori roll, the more electorates there are. But yeah, I just think this is hugely empowering. You might see some people say that it might be a bit inappropriate, like it is labelled like a thirst trap, right? Which we all sort of assume to be this provocative post that sort of seeks to receive compliments or praise and stuff like that. But no, I think it's self-love to a T, and it's informative. It's getting people, or trying to get people enrolled to vote, and she's seeing the effects of it. She posted that she received 70,000 views on one post, and the important stuff, 254 clicks through to vote.nz, which is where you can enroll to vote. So yeah, I will say, if there are any guys who want to jump on this trend and maybe make the odd post, maybe get some of those hot firefighters or something like that. I don't know.
The firefighter calendar is awesome. I think what I do like about this is I think that, at the end of the day, like, we spend so much time sort of like judging women's bodies, etc. But if these women are clearly like very toned, very muscular, like someone who goes to the gym and tries to look muscular, don't succeed that often. But so I think it's so awesome to celebrate, women that do look powerful, and also celebrating that women, can be an important part of democracy as well.
Sure, yeah. off to the side, and like in their blazers and their button-ups and their pantsuits and stuff, which obviously that's awesome too. Do not get me wrong. Power to the pantsuit. But yeah, it's
women can be sexy and in politics.
100%.
And that's what I think is really cool about this. And it's very important that you enroll to vote.
Yes.
And for normal enrolments, they close, I think it's about 2 weeks before E-Day.
I believe the date you need to know about is October 25th. If you are not enrolled to vote by October 25th, your vote will not count. Even if you go to a polling booth and you fill things out, after the Electoral Commission goes through things, your vote won't count. So please make sure you're enrolled to vote by October 25th. So yeah, I guess that's our social media moment of the week. Shout out to Tanya Waikato. Just love to see women using their bodies and their self-love and just putting themselves out there for an awesome reason. And yeah, I just think it's for a really good message. So, Slay,
On that note,
that's us for the week.
we'll see you back here next week.
And until then, let's try and have a bit more of a chill week in politics this week. Because I feel like this week was a little bit, whoa, crazy.
Yeah, but we'll see what the next instalment of Politics brings.
Indeed. Ka kite.